You'll see in the top of your bulletin in red letters, it says Transfiguration Sunday. And indeed, in Christian teachings, the Transfiguration, which Deacon Roy just read for us, is a pivotal moment. Nothing supports the identity of Jesus as Messiah, anointed one, quite like having God declare from within a cloud, "Listen to him," right? In the moments of the Transfiguration, we find that God indeed is God not of the dead but of the living. For the great prophets of Israel were very much alive in this moment. It is a breathing Elijah and a talking Moses that stood before those present on the mountain. What a miraculous moment. I wonder often, though, not so much about the incredibleness of the Transfiguration, but about the words that Jesus gives immediately following this miraculous moment. We read, as they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. What a peculiar statement, right? To follow such a miraculous occurrence. Friends, this is no anomaly. If you're a keen and close Bible reader, you are stumbling upon a recurring theme. We call this the Messianic Secret. Say, Messianic Secret. There you go. This is what's referred to, and it's perplexed Bible readers for some time. Because "don't tell anyone" seems like odd words to emanate from the mouth of the liberator of this world. We read at the end of the first chapter of Mark's Gospel, a leper came to Jesus, begging him and kneeling. He said, "If you choose, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I do choose, be made clean." And immediately the leprosy left and the man was made clean. Now, after sternly warning him, Jesus sent him away at once, saying, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded as a testimony to them." But this man went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the word, so that Jesus could no longer go into a town openly, but stayed out in the country, and people came to him from every quarter. Similarly, in the 8th chapter of Mark, shortly before the occurrence of the Transfiguration in Mark's chronology, we see that Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They answered him, "John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." And he said, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus sternly orders them not to tell anyone about this. My question when I come across this Messianic secret is, what's the big secret? Turn to your neighbor and ask them, what's the big secret? Why does Jesus Christ, God in flesh, not want his divinity to be made known? Wouldn't letting people know that the Messiah is here make things easier? Isn't letting people know sort of the point? As Christians, a lot of our work seems to be centered around explaining our belief in Jesus as the Messiah, God's anointed, our liberator. Surely, Jesus could have backed us up a bit in moments like this. This encounter doesn't make a lot of sense at first. There's a lot about God and the happenings of this world that don't make a lot of sense. Not to me. Malevolent, life-diminishing forms of suffering make little sense to me. Evil's existence, of which we can feel so aware, makes little sense to me. The presence of melanomas and disease, travesty and despair, suffering and evil of all kind are hard to wrap our head around in the face of a benevolent, all-knowing, all-powerful God. It's in the face of darkness that we're left wondering, what's the big secret? Why don't you reveal yourself in more tangible ways, God? Why suffering? Why evil? Why nature's brutality? Why natural disasters? Why cancer? When others are in pain, why do you seem so distant? Why do you allow a faithful peoples to remain in enslavement for over 400 years? Why do you allow unjust systems to remain in existence? Why, Lord? Why? What's the big secret? This month we focus on the experience of African Americans in this country, and their plight rightly points us to the struggles of all God's beloved who face oppressed circumstances. Asian Americans are facing a triple-digit surge in racially motivated violent attacks. The Uyghur people of northwest China are reporting, and have been reporting for some years now, instances of mass rape and sexual abuse, forced sterilization and forced labor. Palestinians and Israelis fight brutally. Russia continues its invasion of Ukraine. And during all this, I do wonder, where is God? Surely he's in it, but why can't I see it? What's the deal? What's the big secret? Well, this morning we're going to get a little perspective. Someone remind me that they're going to get a little perspective. Say, I'm going to get perspective. That's right. Now, it's not that we don't have perspective, right? We do. Everyone has perspective. To have perspective is to have a point of view. Everything we experience is filtered through the lens of our own perspective. You might remember this from a few years ago. Tell me, friends, I've been asking everyone today, what color is this dress? Yell it out. Okay, what's that? So Rose saw gold and white. I heard a blue, and what other color? Blue and black? Okay, so I hear blue and black. I heard from Kurt this morning a white and gold. So Rose, white and gold. Anyone else? Any other colors? Blue and black? I have only ever seen this in blue and black, my friends. Does anyone see it in white and gold right now? Yeah, that's crazy, right? This took the internet by storm some years ago. I don't know if you remember, right? And the thing is, neither of us is wrong. Neither of us is completely right either. Having perspective doesn't mean that we have the whole picture. I often think when I'm saying, God, what's the big secret? God is looking back and saying, James, you just don't have the right perspective. You don't see things as I see things. Your vision is too limited. I am convinced that there are some excellent reasons behind Jesus' Messianic secret. Those of us that critique the secret do so because we don't have the right perspective. We don't have the whole picture. And neither did those who were closest to Jesus. Friends, here's why we study more than just the words on the page of this Bible. For the few hundred years leading up to the first century, the Jewish people had been in constant contest with their Roman overlords. The Romans required all of their subjugated peoples to practice what's called emperor worship. One must declare allegiance to the emperor, to Caesar, as God of the universe. To the monotheistic worshipers of Yahweh, this is impossible. In fact, hundreds, thousands of faithful Jews perished before Rome granted this rare exception to the Jewish people because of their persistent refusal to bow to none besides Yahweh. In this context, the Jews longed for a day when they could practice their worship as they saw fit, a day when they could uphold their laws and maintain their purity and pledge allegiance only to their God. About the same time as Jesus was born, two leading Jewish teachers incited their students to remove this large golden eagle, the symbol of Rome, that was erected at the gate to the temple. Well, this is no bueno in Roman culture. The teachers and students were burned alive and the high priest deposed, a typical Roman response to insurrection. The famous census of Quirinius in AD 6 prompted an open revolt, which was infamously and violently suppressed by the Romans. When Pilate became the prefect in the year 26 AD, he commanded his troops to bring standards bearing the image of Caesar into Jerusalem. A large crowd followed him and sat outside his palace for 5 days and 5 nights in protests. And when he surrounded them all with troops, the whole group fell prostrate. They exposed their necks, and they said they were willing to die rather than have their law transgressed by bringing in the symbol of an idol into Jerusalem. All through the first century, rival groups united around their hatred for Rome, and they raised dozens of insurrections, all of which were met with the famous Roman brutality. What propelled these groups was their belief that Messiah would come, and that when he did, he would raise the people of Israel to their prior glory. He would liberate them from their oppressors, and he would usher in an age of splendor and joy and opulence unknown to the Israelites since the time of Solomon, almost 1,000 years before. And in all their views of how this would happen, they never saw the cross. They didn't have the right perspective. They knew that Messiah would come. They knew that he would bring victory, but they had no conception of how. Their perspective did not allow them to. Messiah, anointed one, was going to come, but they only saw it possible in one way. He was going to conquer. He was going to bring power and might and esteem to followers of Yahweh, and was going to make heads roll while doing it. Into the hope for the Jewish people steps God. We read that after Jesus had stretched out the hand of a leper in the synagogue on the Sabbath, which is a no-no, the Pharisees plotted to kill Jesus. Unaware of this, Jesus withdrew from that place. A large crowd followed him, and he healed all who were ill. He warned them not to tell others about him. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. Here is my servant whom I have chosen, the one I love and whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he has brought justice through to victory. In his name the nations will put their hope. This is a different Messiah than what the people expect. Jesus' mission cannot be understood apart from the cross. The disciples did not understand the cross. The people of this world did not understand the cross. Messiah, God on high, allowing himself to suffer the most humiliating punishment conceivable at the time? No, the people couldn't see it. The people did not have the right perspective. I think occasionally of Judas Iscariot. You know him as the Judas that betrayed Jesus. Many have held that Judas thought that what he was doing in turning Jesus over to the leaders was the right thing. He wasn't trying to get money. He wasn't trying to position himself better. He was trying to bring the Messiah to the world. He had a limited perspective, but he thought he saw more. Judas Iscariot, he's often associated with the Zealots, and particularly with the Sicarii. The Sicarii were a group of religious, rebellious assassins, and they were known, the name even means dagger man, they were known for assassinating their enemies in the crowded streets of Jerusalem with little sicarii, these little knives. And what they would do is they'd come up and they'd stab someone a bunch of times, but the crowds are so dense in Jerusalem that you can do that, and a person will stand up among the crowd for 5, 10, 15 minutes before they collapse. And then when they do, the whole market goes into chaos. Someone's murdered, and the Sicarii are long gone. And Judas has been associated with this group. It seems that Judas believed that by handing Jesus over to the officials, he would be fulfilling the Messianic promise. Jesus, when hands were placed on him, would rise up. He would conquer. This would be the time. Because you can't kill God. You can't kill the Messiah. You can't put him on a cross. Judas never saw the cross. Seeing how his perspective failed him, he killed himself, and in a sad state. Oh, to not understand the limitations of our own perspectives. I saw recently that one of my favorite drummers, his name's David Garibaldi of Tower of Power fame. Anyone know Tower of Power? What is hip? All right, we got some. He was taking a lesson with another well-known drummer, a much younger guy named Dave Elitch, who's out in L.A. And I had also known that David Garibaldi had studied previously with Dom Famularo. He'd taken some lessons with Buddy Rich, and he studied with a guy named Tommy Igoe, who he's close friends with. And every time I think that, I think, why is David Garibaldi in need of a teacher? I mean, he's one of the greats, right? Well, you know why? It's because he knows that it is difficult to see the full picture, and it's particularly difficult to see yourself. It is difficult to have perspective. Multi-Grammy winner Tommy Igoe, who I just mentioned, tells everyone that he never masters his own music. So that's when you've already recorded everything and put it into a mix, and now you're going to make it extra awesome. And why doesn't he master his own music? Because he says you are too close to your own music to master it. You bring too much of your own perspective to the process. You know, we can see with the aid of telescopes, hundreds of thousands, millions of universes. It's really quite incredible. We can tell how they're shaped and how they move and what they look like. There is one universe that we are unable to see, one universe that we're not even able to determine its shape. We can take guesses. Do you know what universe that is? It's our own, the Milky Way. The reason is because we're inside the Milky Way. Right now, our fastest satellite would take about 100,000 years to get far enough away to be able to look back and give us an image of ourselves. It is difficult to see ourselves. Indeed, it may even be impossible to accurately see ourselves. We have limited perspective. There's a reason therapists are required to have therapists. There's a reason musicians benefit from the eyes and ears of other musicians. There's a reason athletes, even the best athletes, always have coaches. When it comes down to each of us, we have limited perspective. Sometimes it takes others to give us a more full perspective. We are not good at viewing ourselves. We have a limited perspective. But believe me when I say that God has a much fuller perspective, I dare even say the full perspective. The first century Jewish community didn't have the full perspective. The disciples did not have the full perspective. The crowds did not have the full perspective. Only God had the full perspective. Only God had the lens that can weave the intricate, detailed tapestry of every single person's experiences together and see the big picture of us as individuals and us as a community. God has the perspective. And guess what? From God's perspective, you are just incredible. I mean it. I want to give you some perspective. You are loved beyond compare. Your future is so, so bright. I look out at some of you, and I brew with excitement. Even as I was preparing this, I was like setting you all up in my mind, and I'm like, oh my goodness, they're just so awesome. There's such a bright light in this world. They make me want to wake up each day, and I just get so excited. I see what everyone in this room sees, what most people in your life see. I see what God sees, that you are destined for great things because you are incredible. You are a light in the world. You are a beacon of love and hope. Your perspective may make it difficult for you to see how beautiful you are to the rest of us, but you are just awesome. Just awesome, you beloved child of God. When we look at others, we remember that we have limited perspective. You may see an angry, mean grump at the street, but God sees a child who has been through some stuff. You may see a corrupt, nagging, vulnerable person, but God sees the pain and trials and tribulations through generations that lead to this one point. You don't see it, of course, because of your limited perspective. But God has the full perspective. And in this perspective, I promise you are loved. Being positioned inside your head as you are may make it difficult to see. But trust the perspective of others when we say, you are just incredible. You are a delight. You make life worth living for others. It's not just you that are incredible too. It's also them. They are loved. Who's they? Every pair of eyes that you look into. You may have trouble seeing why or how someone may be loved. I do all the time. Why and how they contribute. Why and how they are on this earth at the same time and place as you. But God has no difficulty at all because God has the full perspective. Sometimes we do not have the right perspective. Sometimes God's plans are bigger than what we know, and we have to come to face with that reality. You may have perspective. It can be a good perspective. It can be an accurate perspective, but it's very rarely the only perspective. As I look for answers to the suffering in the world, I am humbled by the reminder that I have limited perspective, that God's perspective is much bigger than my own. What's the big secret? I don't know. But I trust that in God's perspective, we ultimately find the answer to our hopes, to our dreams, to our need for liberation and love. Let us not stop looking for answers to the big secrets. Part of the joy of the journey is the journey itself. But let us also consider the limitations of our own perspectives and pray that God graces us with a more full view of what's around us. Let us pray. Oh God, we see so much around us. Some of it makes sense, some of it makes zero sense. And in these times, we wonder, God, what's going on? What's the deal? What's the big secret? Well, Lord, may we have the humility to remember that we don't have the answers, nor do we have the ability to get the full perspective. But may we trust in your own sovereignty and remember that you have the full perspective, and may we trust that you are moving us to our final destination, to a place that you promise for us, a place of love and wholeness, of equity and joy. We're grateful for you, God. In your name we do pray. Amen. Amen. Friends, let's stand and sing together this final hymn.